Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Resident Founder podcast. I'm your host, Daniella. I'm an emergency medicine resident doctor, and I'm also a tech startup founder of PayScopeMD, where I'm building a platform for physicians to upload their contracts and make it easier to understand and also get some real-time salary benchmarking. At the time you guys are watching this, it'll already be 2026. So happy holidays, happy new year. I'm excited to also announce that we're having our first guest onto the podcast that I'll be shortly announcing. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, this is the Resident Founder. My goal is to chronicle my journey of being a physician entrepreneur and also bring on other physicians who are pursuing entrepreneurship while also pursuing a career in medicine. And so for our first guest ever onto the podcast, I'm very happy to have Dr. John Rudolph Smith, also goes by JR. He's a current orthopedic surgery resident over at the Mayo Clinic. JR also is maybe known for you guys on social media platforms, including his YouTube channel called Evolving Medic, where he's chronicled his journey from pre-med stage, medical student, and now current resident physician as well. He started by being a track athlete over at Duke University, and as mentioned, he is now was a medical student at Mayo Clinic and now a current orthopedic surgery resident. JR is also a husband, a father, and has also built an amazing platform through his content creation on YouTube called Evolving Medic, as well as built a platform for also teaching students through Teach As You Learn, and as well as his co-founder and co-president of the OrthoPlug. So with that, JR, thank you so much for joining me on the Resident Founder podcast as our first host.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is incredible. I am super privileged to be here and honestly inspired and motivated by what you're doing. And so I'm just honored to be able to contribute to hopefully motivating others to be able to know they can pursue medicine and entrepreneurship if that's something they're interested in.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing I want to get into is a little bit of your pre-med journey. So I mentioned that you were a track athlete at Duke University. So what was like the pivot from you of going to be a track athlete to now becoming a doctor?
So I initially went to college to basically do whatever would be the easiest thing that would allow me to go to track practice. So I did not come in pre-med. I didn't come in really thinking about any future goals or anything like that. Ultimately, I was like, all right, I'm here to run track. What courses are going to like make it easiest to do that good? And so that was my initial introduction into college. I had a pretty devastating knee injury. I had like a multi-leg knee dislocation. So it was a injury that required multiple procedures, multiple surgeries. And that was my introduction into medicine. Before then, I don't even know if I saw a PCP regularly. And so, you know, my idea of medicine was absent. And so this was my opportunity to get at least involved in medicine from the patient perspective. And honestly, I was just really inspired and motivated by my physician, my surgeon. He was just like super cool and didn't give me what I would have perceived a physician to be. He didn't give me those vibes of, you know, just super buttoned up, didn't really connect with me, you know, come in, fix my knee, go out, no relationship kind of building. I don't know why I perceived medicine to be that way, but that was just where I was coming from at the time. But I developed a really strong relationship with him. He inspired me to basically want to do for others what he did for me, that kind of like, you know, reciprocal story that a lot of people in medicine do have, where they're inspired by somebody in the healthcare industry and then want to be able to pay that forward. So my story was not unique in that way, but yeah, I think it may be unique in that I didn't know anything about medicine and then just had one kind of life altering injury, and then that kind of paved the way for everything to come.
No, that's absolutely amazing. And I think it's also like very nice because I feel like sometimes too, like in medicine, and even for you now being an orthopedic surgery resident, most people like have some type of story of like, I had a family who was in medicine, right? And that motivated them to do that. But in your case, it just happened to be that time when you're a track athlete and unfortunately had that bad injury, and it kind of sparked that kind of like pivot for you of like, wait, I can actually do this. And I think that's so important for like people who look like you, who look like us, to kind of have that motivation that you can actually do something. So I think that's also really great too, because sometimes people are like, well, I'm not going to be a doctor because I've never seen somebody be a doctor. But in your case, you're like, I've used this like injury to like propel me to do something that I really want to do. And I think that's something very commendable.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, yeah. I think the next thing too is talking a little about your YouTube channel, Evolving Medic, right? And so, you know, you've built this platform kind of once you made the decision to go into medical school. And I even remember for myself, so I applied during the pandemic and you had a whole playlist of like the AMCAS application. So like, I remember actually using your videos for my application process. But take me back, like, why did you decide to create Evolving Medic during that time?
Yeah, so it's funny because you actually just touched on, I think, the central reason for its genesis, and it's that there weren't. I was looking for things. Again, I had no experience in medicine. I didn't have anybody in my family really in medicine or anything like that, so I didn't have people to go to. So, and I I guess I'm technically a millennial, but I still use YouTube to basically get a lot of information, or at least I did, and I still do. So trying to figure out, and also as like in the athletic field in college, like I wasn't really in the pre-med scene still, so I wasn't like really going all the stuff. Like I didn't really know how to write a personal statement. I didn't have mentors. I didn't really know those kind of things. So YouTube was that for me. And there was like some good stuff on there. There was decent things on there, but um, while I was looking and getting more, I think, well equipped in the medicine pre-med health industry, this field, I came across a stat that more Black men were applying to medical school in the 70s than they were when I was applying. Which was, I think right right during the pandemic, or like the year before the pandemic started. And so that was something that kind of blew my mind. And then as I was looking through YouTube videos to try to find things that I could use to craft my own, to learn how to even apply, I was like, none of these people really look like me. And so kind of circling back to what you had mentioned about the importance of representation. And, oftentimes people don't think that they can be something unless they see something. And so for me, it was an opportunity to say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing at all. And at that point, I actually wasn't really like a big social media person. I was like the last person in my friend group to have like Instagram. Like I just wasn't really too involved in all of that. But it was something for me to just go out on a limb and say, okay, this is probably going to like fail completely. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm probably the last person who needs to try to tell people how to do anything, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm at least going to document the process, and I'm just going to share it from the perspective of a Black man, because I came across that stat that Black men aren't doing this. So maybe if they can at least see somebody doing it, even if they're doing it and failing, it will give somebody some inspiration to maybe do it better than me, or provide some wisdom that they can use to propel them forward in their own kind of medical or pre-medical journeys. And so it really was just kind of a, nobody's doing this. Somebody needs to do this. I may not be the most well-equipped, but COVID makes people have time. It made people have time. So I don't have the excuse that I don't have the time. And so that's kind of where all of it started.
No, that's absolutely great. And I mean, honestly, like even for myself too, I'm also starting and have no idea what I'm doing. But like you mentioned, like you just do it and then you learn as you go, right? And like obviously now you've built like an amazing platform to where like you've picked up on stuff from you just building and trying. And I think that's important for a lot of people listening, of like just do it first and you will learn over time. Like I think something even for myself, I have to remind myself is like it's not about perfection. It's literally just doing the thing first, right? Like just getting out there, posting the content, making the video. Like I said, I reached out to you on a limb. I was like, who do I want as a guest? And I was like, you're a perfect fit. You just have to just do the thing first. And I think the other thing too that was like very commendable that you kind of mentioned as well is like really figuring out what you want out of the platform, right? Like you kind of saw that statistic, you're like, what can I really use, and go from there. And then obviously you being at the time, like applying to medical school, you're like, this can be what my brand can really be about. And I think that's also something too that a lot of people can like really look up to and see. So I think that's also amazing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And to the point of just like getting out there and doing it, there's a parable that I absolutely love. It's like this, it's a pottery parable. And it's just, I'll try to do this as quickly as possible, but it's essentially, there's like a teacher in a pottery class, and he is breaking up students into two groups, and he gives one group of students the goal of building one pot over 30 days. So they have 30 days to craft the perfect one pot or whatever. And then he gives the other half of the students the goal of, you have to make one pot every day for 30 days. So they have, 24 hours to make one pot, and then they have to redo another one for the 30 days. And then he ranks the pots. So he gets kind of the top 10. And all of the top 10 come from the group of students who had to make one every single day, not the people who had 30 days to make a single one. And the whole idea behind that is, just by doing something, then you realize, okay, the next one tomorrow, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And then by doing that again, then the next one you get to do a little bit something else. And so the learning that you have from actually like quantity builds quality. You can't just like do the quality. And so a lot of people are kind of halted in progress just from not starting and not doing the thing. But things only get good after you just do it and do it and do it and fail and do it and do it and do it and fail.
No, that's an amazing analogy. And honestly, I was thinking about, even when prepping for this episode with you, is at the time when you started making content, I really don't recall a lot of like how we will term like med influencers now, or even like people who are yourself who are at the time like medical students, like documenting the journey. So like, for example, like when creating this podcast, I had people like yourself to look up to, Sean Anderson, Dr. Antonio Webb to kind of look up to. Did you have anybody like back then to look up to in terms of like content ideas and like even starting a platform like YouTube?
Not really, and it's actually funny. Me and Sean are pretty close,
Hmm.
and so we've kind of been like following each other's journey and talking to each other throughout. And he started, I think, similar to when I did, and just really was like doing lots of vlogging and that kind of thing. And he actually motivated me to try to vlog, like, and a lot of the stuff early on, I was vlogging as well, just as part of the like. Okay, he's doing some vlogging stuff. Let me see what that's about. And so there were a few people like that who were kind of at the same time as me.
Hmm.
Um, One person that particularly just inspired me to create content in general and like learn the process of it was someone named Ali Abdal, and he was somebody who was a former physician and now is essentially only an entrepreneur. And so, I think that finding inspiration in people who are in the same industry is great because it's like nice that you can actually see you're going to get more tangible kind of, I don't know, like resources, inspiration, and if somebody's in the field itself. But there's also other people, outside of the field that can provide some of that same inspiration for you to then transfer to your industry or to your field. And so, at the time when I was watching Ali Abdal, he wasn't making like medical related content or any other type of content that I was making. He was basically just making content on how to grow a YouTube channel, which was the thing that I was also trying to do at the time. And that's why I kind of liked his content. And so a lot of the things that I do in my own channel, like the talking head stuff and all of these kind of like the way that I format a lot of my videos, the topic is different, but a lot of it came from inspiration from someone in a different industry, in Ali Abdal. So that was something that I did learn, is that I could find a lot of people who may not be doing exactly what I'm doing, but I can take a lot from them. And then Antonio Webb was a little bit before me as well, and he was a Black man who was doing this, and he's in orthopedic surgery. And he's doing a lot of the things that I actually still want to do in the future. Like he has a web space, he has an entire like production studio that he's building, and that kind of thing. And a lot of that is incredibly inspiring for me too. And I found that the more that I get into the field or the industry, this like entrepreneurial kind of industry, the more people that I come across. And so just kind of engulfing myself in that, then I realize there's people in the industry that I can find inspiration from and outside of it.
Yeah, that's really dope. I think the other thing too is looking at your content, right? Like once again, you started as more pre-med medical student and now residency. Like, how do you feel like your content has kind of evolved over time? And like, what do you kind of think is the future of like your YouTube platform as you continue to grow in residency?
Yeah, I love that question because it's something that I literally ask myself on a regular basis. And I find that it has been a challenge for me because I think that a lot of the things that you'll learn when you're trying to build an audience is like you have to establish your niche and you have to make sure that you serve that niche. And so, like you said, when I was basically applying to medical school, my niche was pre-med students who are also applying to medical school. Then when I was in med school, I was still trying to serve the pre-meds because I was maybe one step ahead of them in the academic journey to become a physician. And then when I was later on in medical school, I didn't have as much to say to pre-meds, but I had a few more things to say about med students, like doing well in their clerkship, studying for their step exams, those kind of things. And then, going into residency, then, I think more about, performing on residency interviews or, sub-I performance and like things like that. So I'm always kind of thinking about the natural thing for me is to think about the student who's 1 to 2 steps behind me. And so I think that is how it has naturally kind of evolved. But I think that the long term kind of ecosystem of an audience that I hope to have is bringing everybody together and having consistent content for multiple different phases of life. So that I'll be able to, even if I'm attending physician, I can still reach that pre-med student, or I can reach that med student, or I can reach that resident. Because right now, the current thing is, again, just kind of one step back. This is the most recent thing. This is what I remember most, like I don't think I would be well equipped at all to tell anybody how to do anything on the MCAT, but I can tell you about step 2, and so that's kind of how things have been currently. But I do want to be able to provide consistent value for a larger net eventually. It's just kind of not as natural as just reaching kind of one step behind.
No, it's good. And I think it also like leans into your name, evolving medic, right? Like you literally are evolving over time, right? Like you started as the pre-med and now you're a resident. And then once again, you're eventually going to be an attending physician soon. And so what your audience is going to be and what you're trying to serve is going to be different. But once again, you still kind of have that brand and niche that I think will still be valuable to so many people. Yeah. I think the other thing too is talking a little bit about your involvement with SNMA, right? So you obviously applied to orthopedic surgery and now you're a resident in orthopedic surgery as well. So I know you were part of the SNMA orthopedic surgery group, but then you also led the OrthoPlug. Can you talk a little bit about that and what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got involved with SNMA, I think second or third year of medical school. And during that time, they started to create interest groups, specialty specific interest groups. And so I was in the first cohort of the SNMA orthopedic surgery interest group. It was initially started by a resident. Her name is Megan Badajo. She's a orthopedic surgery resident at Duke. I think she's a PGY4 this year. And so she kind of led the orthopedic surgery interest group one, and they kind of had someone leading. She was probably she was probably a fourth year medical student at this time, but they had medical students leading, each little interest group. And I knew her before this, and so she kind of talked to me about helping to get involved in some of the leadership of the SNMA orthopedic surgery interest group. And so then I took on the role the next year, now the second year of the interest groups, to be I think I was the public relations coordinator or something like that. But there were three people. There was like an education team, a public relations team, and some other team. And so we kind of all were designed to expand opportunities and resources for medical students interested in the specialty that we were representing. And so during that, especially as the public relations kind of person, my goal was just to let's get this out to as many people as possible. What I wanted to do during that was actually create a podcast that was going to be through SNMA, and I was going to call it the OrthoPlug. And I realized that it is difficult to create something like that, with more of a well-established organization like the SNMA is, to just let some random medical student start a podcast with their name in it, with less of a constraint and, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of hoops that I would have to jump through to even be able to get it off of the ground, having every episode scripted from them, and having things real well reviewed from, the organization. And, that would probably introduce a lot of delays in publishing, a lot of, difficulties with, I felt like I had a great conversation and maybe they didn't, and now I can't ever post it, or, just certain kind of hurdles that were going to be challenging to navigate around. And so because of that, I actually just made the OrthoPlug its own separate business kind of thing with a few of the other people who are on the SNMA orthopedic surgery interest group kind of board. And so we kind of made a separate organization, which caused some confusion because we were like, is OSIG part of the OrthoPlug, or is the OrthoPlug part of OSIG, and that kind of thing. But we actually made it a separate entity so that we could have a little bit more freedom, which was really good for us because, we made it an LLC, and, which Evolving Medic is also its own kind of thing, but which is an LLC as well. So I was starting to learn more about the business of things and starting to understand, what it's like to, found a company, and that process from a more technical administrative perspective, and then all of the things that come with it. So that was where all of that came from. And then we wanted to provide resources just from our perspective that we didn't have to, have an additional organization's permission to kind of navigate through. And SNMA has actually been incredibly supportive of it, which is incredible. They're a phenomenal organization. I don't want this to be perceived as there was any type of conflict between the two. Mm-hmm. It was just one that they were like, we love what you're going to do, but if you want the freedom to do it, then you're probably going to have to do it and not put SNMA on the name. And that was what we did. And they've been incredibly supportive of it.
No, that's absolutely amazing. And I like what you said. It's listen, obviously, once again, for all the listeners tuning in who is definitely a medical student and you're definitely from an underrepresented background, join SNMA. As JR mentioned, they have specialty groups for every specialty. So not just orthopedic surgery, family medicine, urology, ENT, every single specialty. And they have tremendous resources, and they always have a national conference that happens every single year, which is amazing for you to connect with other physicians, other medical students, and also help propel you to your next journey. But I also love what you said. It was you kind of saw the roadblock and you're like, instead of like giving up, you're like, I'm just going to pivot and create something of my own with my own freedom, my own flexibility, while still maintaining the brand and identity that you originally wanted to do. I think also too, what you're the podcast component of it, and obviously you've interviewed other orthopedic surgery like attendings or even residents. Were there any commonalities or themes that you kind of picked up on in terms of interviewing those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of purpose of the OrthoPlug podcast was ultimately similar to SNMA, right? It's to be able to provide a resource for particularly underrepresented students interested in the field. And so the people that I wasn't interviewing identified as underrepresented in some way, racially, their gender identity, what have you. And so um, being able to hear unique challenges that a group faces and then subsequent unique tools, strategies, ideas that they incorporate into their own journey to be able to overcome those challenges, I think was one of the things that I kind of saw as a commonality. And to kind of put more detail and pinpoint some of those things, I realized how important mentorship is for a lot of people, particularly in the underrepresented particularly in underrepresented communities. And a lot of people attribute their success to being able to find kind of this hierarchy of mentors. So people will have a pre-med will have a med student mentor, a resident mentor, attending physician mentor, a fellow mentor. The people who I found were the most successful oftentimes attribute their success to not just the mentorship, but to having mentors at different levels. And that allowed them to connect with people on different things in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. Learning how to get into medical school you're gonna find a lot more wisdom from a medical student, honestly, than you would from an attending physician most times. Unless people are like super into this as an attending physician, but usually people are like outdated with a lot of things. And so finding someone who's just one step ahead is valuable. And those conversations and just kind of seeing the commonality with that was something that inspired me too, with just, wanting to knowing that it was okay for me to be there, for people just one step, behind me. Cause a lot of times I would even have imposter syndrome about like, why is this med student, why do I have any reason to be able to talk about any of this kind of stuff, and so hearing their experience and that they actually truly found it valuable. And I know in myself, I find it valuable. I've always had somebody who was just, one step ahead as well. Gave me a little bit more confidence in what I was doing myself. But that was one commonality that I found.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing too. Like, I think mentorship is something very keen for myself. Like, I'm first generation everything. Both of my parents are immigrants. So I was first like generation American born, first generation college student. And like, as supportive as my family was, I couldn't look to them for advice. And so mentorship became like the very big key of like, how do I even get into college, right? It was some mentor who was able to help me navigate the college application process. And then when I made the decision to become pre-med, I was like, how do I even navigate this process of like going to medical school? So once again, I think absolutely mentorship is very key. And then leaning for you as well, with mentorship also being important, you kind of built this platform as well of having teach as you learn. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of what that platform is and, what do you kind of provide for students who are looking into it?
Yeah. And that I think is really where I try to take what I learned about this mentorship at different levels and provide this as more of an open access resource for students. And so essentially what this is it's just a big community where people are able to engage with both teaching, mentoring, as well as receiving teaching and mentorship. And one thing that I found is that a lot of the people, especially in the field of medicine, have kind of a predisposition for liking to teach people, educate, mentor. It's kind of, and that's why I just love the field. It's like incredibly noble, and it's usually, a group of people who are, smart, they're talented from an education standpoint and an academic standpoint, but they want to use that to help other people. And then they want to be able to help other people who are interested in doing what they're doing. It's kind of like that's usually what makes up the typical person in this field. And so I wanted to create a group where people could be able to get that itch scratched, because I know that I love that. That's where, like we've been talking about, a lot of my passion lies. And I know that there's a lot of other people who love that as well, but don't necessarily want to start an entire YouTube channel to, or do a whole thing, but just like, let me go into a community and see, if there's anyone who has questions that I can answer, or, let me like go in and join this, just Q&A live session, see what's in there, see if I can contribute to any of the answers. And maybe I'll ask some questions to people who are at the next stage. And so it's essentially a community right now of primarily pre-med and med students. And I do like monthly kind of Q&As where I'm just available. We have kind of a chat thing where people can go in and ask questions in what I believe is a safer space than, Reddit threads, that kind of thing, where it's, I think, people, you don't know, when there's anonymity, there's always, risk for toxicity. So, this is something that, I think people can, send questions in, talk about their experience in a secure chat space that's safe and accurate. But also, again, just giving people the opportunity to connect with each other, find mentors, be a mentor. And that's really what the purpose of Teach As You Learn is.
That's definitely amazing. And I definitely like how you mentioned too, like it's more of having that face to face connection, right? Like I think as you mentioned, like something like Reddit, like you're just kind of talking behind a screen. So it's not as personable, but like they can see you, they obviously know your background, they know your story, and it can help a little bit in terms of that mentorship piece of like, okay, I have somebody who can be like a go-to person that go about questions. And I think also too with your platform and too what Teach As You Learn is nice too, is because like you also have like different sessions kind of like built in at different stages, right? Like I think one event I do remember you guys having is like gearing up for clinical rotations and like how to excel well in that, or like for pre-med students, like how to do well on your MCAT and creating like a study schedule. So I think it's a little bit for everybody at different stages, which I think is also nice as well too.
Yeah, yeah, and we're like it. When I've had so many of these things going on, the ortho plug, all my medic videos, obviously residency, I've realized that some of the things have had to, take a back seat for certain seasons. But I'm very, very excited for this next season in Teach As You Learn, because we're going to be doing a lot more of what you're mentioning now, which is, finding ways to make things specific for people, whether it's like small groups that's based on specialty interest kind of things, having leaders, because there's a lot of people too who ask for just ways that they can get more involved, and having leader run events, where we can have 12 leaders who just once a month have their own dedicated events on what they're passionate about. And there's going to be, somebody who's passionate about the MCAT who will do a much better job, like I said, about reviewing how to do well on that than I ever would, or people that are passionate about research or clerkships, all those kind of things. And so, it's an inspiring group. And I think that has been something too that I've really valued, is that, you surround yourself with people who fit that description of, that I mentioned earlier. And then they just inspire you. I get to learn from them. I learn from people who are, stages behind me too in this hierarchical ladder. And, that's incredible too. So, I'm very, very excited for that group.
I think also to pivot too, you kind of mentioned this too. You juggle a lot of different stuff, right? Like you're obviously a resident, you're a content creator, you're a father, you're a husband. So tell me about like how do you kind of balance all of these things together to kind of hopefully find like the perfect balance of it all?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that I haven't necessarily figured it out completely. I think this is something where, I think I'll just continue to learn and adapt, and, as cheesy as it is, I evolve, as I go. What I've currently found to be effective, is first just with the family thing. I kind of made a self promise to myself that I would prioritize family over, anything else. And so it's hard to do that when you don't have control over your time. And throughout this process of becoming a physician, there's a lot of time that is not, a lot of just things that are out of our control, but time being one of them. But there are things that we do have control. There are moments of time that we have control of. And in those opportunities, for me to promise to myself that family is going to come first, like I can't overcome the things I don't have control of. But if I do have control of it, and there's any type of conflict between a family endeavor, like my son's, I don't know, basketball practice or something, and a work thing, like, doing some more research, like it making that promise just makes it clear what decision to do. And so clarity with like decision making helps a lot, because otherwise, whenever the decision comes up, I can easily convince myself to do something that will seem like quote unquote more productive or whatever. And the same can be for the community stuff, the videos, content creation, whatever it is. I can always like like sometimes that will feel more productive than just sitting on the couch and like playing with my two sons, or hanging out with my wife, or whatever the case may be. But it's nice to have like made an established rule that I just like try to follow. So that's one thing that I found to be effective. And then another thing is more of I think a technical time management strategy that I think a lot of people use that I've personally found to be helpful as well. And it's effectively kind of time blocking or time batching, and basically because I'm trying to juggle a lot of things. I do have a established hierarchy of things that I do, and obviously it's like family, then it's like residency, and then it's like all the other stuff. But I essentially tried to schedule all the other stuff on like a day during the week. And so, for example, today is like the day where I can do the content creation. I could, have this awesome conversation with you. I can, think about some things that I want to do with Teach As You Learn. I can do all of those kind of things. And then I'm not thinking about any of these things for the rest of the week. Because then, when that free time comes up, it's like I already eliminated one thing, so I'm not thinking about the content creation. So then it's just like, all right, am I hanging out with the family? Am I doing residency kind of stuff, that kind of thing? And then next week I'll see on my schedule again, all right, this is going to be the day where I can, try to do those kind of things. And it's nice too, because it also gives me, it makes it kind of possible for my brain to accept not doing something quote unquote productive in terms of work, which is really hard. And students feel this all the time too, right? Like, you just feel like if you're not studying that you should be studying, or if you're not doing that research project that you should be, or whatever. But if it's on my calendar to do something else, then I still feel like I'm doing the right thing. Whereas before, when like things weren't on my calendar, like then it just is like, oh, I could be doing something, or I should be doing something else. And like that kind of thing eats away at you. And even if you are trying to rest, like you're not getting good rest because you're just like anxious about what you could be doing. But I just write on my calendar, this is the day that I'm not doing any of those kind of things. And so then when I'm not doing those things, I'm doing what I told myself I was supposed to do, which makes me feel better about doing that. So those are basically two things, one more of an intangible, just like, promise yourself the choices that you'll make, and try to stay true to that. Like find your values and make a hierarchy of that, and prioritize the things higher on the list when you have any conflict. And then time blocking has been more of a tangible resource strategy that I've incorporated into my life.
No, I think that's amazing advice. And I think it's definitely inspirational for people who are in medical school or even in residency too, like balancing a lot. I totally agree. Like even for myself, right? I still haven't mastered a perfect balance of it all. Like I'm in my intern year of residency, so everything just feels like a deer in the headlights of me like every single day. But I do agree with what you said. Like it's about finding boundaries, right? Like I think even as a medical student, I definitely learned that very early on that like, you talk about a lot like in medical school of like learning is like drinking from a fire hose, and you definitely do feel like that. But I think, what somebody said to me as a medical student that was true is like you can literally spend 24 hours like studying nonstop and still have a long to-do list of things to study. So you have to set really good boundaries, like you mentioned. Like so for me as a medical student, my boundary was like Saturdays I do not study at all. So every single Saturday, no matter, as long as I wasn't on clinical rotation that day, like I was not studying. So, like that was one of my boundaries. Like Saturday was my day to rest, recover, go to my grandparents' house and check up on them, like just find those things. Obviously in residency can't do that as much, but definitely like just like you mentioned, find those boundaries, time block for things that are important to you so you don't lose that prioritization. So I think that's also important as well. I think also too, with your content creation and everything you've built, have you ever dealt with anybody telling you like not to really produce content? Because like I mentioned before too, like during the time when you made content, not a lot of people were doing what you're doing. And then even now you being a resident, have you ever dealt with anybody being like, why are you building content? Or like maybe you shouldn't build content?
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly though, it's usually been like younger people than older people. So
Mm,
I assumed, and especially like when I was applying to residency, I didn't know again too much about healthcare when I was a pre-med. So applying to med school, I was just like I had blissful ignorance. Um, but I didn't understand the kind of old-fashioned nature of the healthcare industry. Applying to residency at that point, I was well versed in just knowing like, all right, this is like, oh, this is, they will hear YouTube and have something in their mind and see it as purely a distraction and maybe perceive my character as something that I don't ascribe to. And so I was very fearful when I was applying. I didn't know if I was going to mention this on my application. I knew that even if I didn't, it would probably get brought up and found out by residents and something, or, whatever. Um, what I found though was that, I would have some people who were more of like my peers and who would just say like, hey man, like you probably want to like make all of your content private or, do all this kind of stuff, especially while you're applying, just so that people can't see it and see. And I was coming from more my peers or, someone just like a step or two ahead when I was applying. But the wisdom that I actually got from more seasoned faculty mentors who knew me personally helped me identify the concern that their peers would have with content creation. And it's that they would perceive it as possibly a distraction and possibly focused more so on an entertainment industry rather than an education-based industry. And so that helped me create a spectrum on what content can really be. And everyone's, I think, on a spectrum between like pure entertainment, the Mr. Beast of content creation to education. And I lean in all of my content has leaned much more towards the education side of things, for better or worse in terms of like, spiritual value or, whatever, but that's just where I've leaned more towards. And because of that, the people who have seen my content have seen it more so as the new way that people are trying to educate and teach their peers. And I've had older people talk about, back in their day, that the classic quote, like, they loved to tutor. They loved to do, they loved to find groups and mentor, and they love to get involved in organizations and, be involved that way and do that kind of thing. And if you look at what they are still doing, a lot of these people who are very passionate educators in the academic industry, they're involved in a lot of different organizations, committees, all of these things that are designed to mentor and educate and do all that kind of stuff. And even research is their opportunity to educate their peers. And it's time spent away from direct clinical patient care, but it's supporting and promoting the advancements of medicine. And so that helped me, being able to kind of think through that, helped me disregard some of the concerns that I felt like were more superficial and lean into, this is a true part of me. So I'm just going to like be that. And now if somebody asks me about it, because they may not know, like most people probably won't know. They'll just say like, oh, I see that you did YouTube, or, oh, like some of the residents told me that you do YouTube. What is that about? Now I'll be able to explain it in a way like I kind of just did. Hopefully being able to show them that, this is something that is helping to progress the field of medicine, which is ultimately what I am trying to do. And then the other piece that I think has been helpful for me is that people usually don't question extracurriculars unless there is shortcomings in the primary agenda, right? Like if I was struggling, if I didn't get a good step score, if I, was like delayed in getting research back to people, but like posting YouTube videos or making podcast episodes, things like that, then it, regardless of if it's in direct conflict with each other, they at least have a reason for why I'm struggling. And so if you don't give people a reason for why you're struggling, then they usually just support the extra things that you have going on. And people in the field of medicine, at least, and entrepreneurship, make themselves very busy. And one quote that I love is that if you want to get anything done, ask the busiest person, which is like, counterintuitive, because it's like, they already got so many things that they're doing. But the people who are usually like very busy doing a lot of things, they are usually the people who just can do a lot of things. And so I found that, as long as I'm staying, on my P's and Q's with the workflow of residency and medical school and throughout my academic training, that the extra stuff can be seen as more of a positive than a negative. And it has come into fruition in that way.
That's really great. And I think another good takeaway from what you just mentioned too is about authenticity, right? Like this is who you are, right? Like you built this platform to focus on education. You talked about way in the beginning of the episode talking about like it sparked from you not seeing a lot of black men enrolling into medicine. So this is more of a compilation of who you are and really an extension of that. It just so happens that you're doing it in front of camera instead of just like one-on-one conversation. And so I think that's something important too for people to kind of take away about like finding your authentic self and like finding your voice of what you want to be heard is something that you could be very proud of. So I think that's also great. And I think also too, like recently you just came out with a YouTube video talking about like why every young doctor should kind of build a brand. Can you touch a little bit about that in terms of like why you kind of feel that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that people will look at online brand building in a few years like we currently look at like crypto or like the baby boomer generation looked at real estate, right? It's going to be one of those things where it's like, I probably missed it. I wish I would have done it, man. Like that would have been the thing to do, and I think that just the direction that society is moving in, tech is basically directing all of society at this point. And with that, online presence becomes more valuable, and other like massive brands are recognizing this as well. Like Nike is Nike because of an individual. Michael Jordan really helped establish Nike as what it is. And they continue to do that. That's why they invest so much in these athletes and give them brand shoes and all those kind of things. Because if there weren't people representing these companies, then people would probably not connect with them, or the consumer would probably not connect with them. And so I think eventually, though, it's going to be less like these massive companies like, Nike, but it's going to be individual people connecting with a consumer in some way, whether it's just a consumer of content or someone that you're selling a product to, or, whatever it is. And it's going to be a lot easier to do that in the future, which I, again, believe is going to be one in which people will be doing this much more from an individualized standpoint. It's going to be a lot easier to do that if you start working and establishing a brand now. And essentially, all that is just establishing public trust that you are someone that, they believe that they should be consuming that content or consuming that product or whatever it is that you're, interested in, sharing to the world. And trust isn't built, like quickly. And so I think that, and especially in the field of medicine where, it's easier and easier now to look up your physician. People are making decisions based off of who they go and see for their health care based on what they see online and based on what they ask ChatGPT about. And it's actually funny because I see a few patients, when I'm in clinic and they're like, oh, like, I asked ChatGPT, who was the expert in cartilage restoration, and it sent me to, the doctor that I'm working with or whatever. And so it's funny, even like in AI only, it doesn't, have a natural brain. So it doesn't have like natural experiences. And so it's curating its responses based on what's available online. And so a lot of these people, have an online presence based off of, hundreds of research publications that they have, decades of time spent in the field presenting on these different topics, those kind of things that ChatGPT can reference, or these other large language model like AI-based resources can reference. But eventually, if you are somebody who is putting out content based off of whatever you are passionate about, I would foresee in the future you're going to continue to be passionate about that, and you are going to want ChatGPT to see you as the world expert in whatever you're passionate about. And so in the field of medicine particularly, I mean, even if it's like a lot of us, again, just like mentoring stuff. So, talk about the things that have worked for you, talk about the resources that you found helpful, the study strategies, the, life hacks that you use, and just share that with somebody. And eventually you're going to establish a brand of trust. And it's like that takes time. But in 10 years, I think that anyone who works on developing a brand now, in 10 years are going to be very, very thankful that they did, versus somebody who doesn't and then is going to wish that they did. I think I like the analogy of like the Bitcoin, it's just like, I'm not touching it now, but 10 years ago, I wish I did, so.
No, absolutely. And I think it's interesting too, because like I think that's going to be like the new wave now of, I mean, it is currently right now, but I think it will continue to be that way. And I think it's interesting too, because currently right now we unfortunately have in like the medical community, like mistrust already, right? And so I think like building that personal brand, building trust is going to hopefully be a medium to hopefully fix things in that sense. But I also think it touches upon what you said before too, of like medicine has always been a little bit more of an old fashioned, older way where like you don't do this at all, right? Like what we're doing is more of the unconventional way of building a brand and stuff. Like usually it's like you go to the best medical school you possibly can get into, you do well in residency, you publish great research on PubMed, and that builds the credibility. But now, like it's more about like who has the most followers or what content do you guys post on TikTok, what's your LinkedIn page looks like. So I agree, like it's a very interesting kind of like dynamic now of like every doctor I kind of see, especially who are a little bit on the younger side, are building that brand. Like even for myself, I'm on TikTok now, and like I see a lot of surgeons, like primarily in private practice, for example, building TikToks, right? And having videos like behind the scenes, sewing surgery. You know, we talked about Dr. Webb earlier too. Like now he has this whole media company revolving around physicians and wanting to kind of build content creation as well too. So I definitely agree. It's definitely going to become the future.
Yeah, and I'm like I mentioned, like super inspired by Dr. Webb. It's funny though, I have like this Notion page just on like future things that I want to do, and one of them is literally exactly what he's doing. And this was something I wrote down like years ago, and I'm like, this is, other people see this as something that is, important, which is, creating some type of, business for other people to come that don't want to get involved in the, videography and knowing how to post stuff. And they just want to come and say, I need help building the brand. You guys have the editors, the team, the whatever. This is what I want to do. And then, support them in that endeavor. But he's going to help a lot of people, and particularly in the private practice setting, which the vast majority of physicians still are in, which is private practice. It's going to be very hard to be a private practice physician, and have people trust you with something as valuable and important as their healthcare without knowing anything about you. That used to work. It used to just be like, I'm just going to the doctor, and because doctor is in the front of the name, that's enough trust and validation for them to be able to, do the most intimate thing that you can do to a human being, which is take care of their health. And that's no longer the case. There's mistrust, like you said, and there's a lot of other people who are doing the thing of building an online presence. And so if I see somebody who says and who has evidence of doing this one procedure or studying this one thing or talking about this one thing online for the past 5 years, and someone else who doesn't have anything, any of that, it's going to be it's a clear decision for me, and it's going to be a clear decision for other patients too. So, yeah, just really emphasizes the point to start now. And it doesn't. I also do want to say quickly that it doesn't have to be like what I do or what you do, Daniella. Like like making a podcast or doing YouTube. Like it's a heavy lift, and a lot of people don't enjoy that. They don't necessarily have the personality where they would find that enjoyable. But even like content, there's so many different mediums of it. You do audio based content with a podcast. I do a lot of video based content with, YouTube videos. People do like a lot of written based content with blog posts, Twitter or X or whatever. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do, newsletters, like all of these different kind of mediums. And you don't have to be in front of a camera, because one of the like top shoulder elbow surgeons in the country that a lot of my mentors here, where I'm at residency, aspire to be. Basically, he just has a blog post, and he's no longer dedicating significant amount of time to the traditional academic research that requires a much more thorough vetting process to get published. He just enjoys writing a weekly blog post on various things related to shoulder and elbow surgery. And this is something that's available for other physicians to read and learn from, but also from his future patients. And as a 60 to 70-year-old male, he's probably not going to want to start a YouTube channel right now, or he's probably not going to want to do some of the other kind of things that that we're enjoying doing. But he still found a medium to be able to do that in a way that resonates with his peers and with his patients. And so there's just lots of different opportunities out there.
Oh, well said. But JR, anything else that you have going on that you want to promote or say? And also, how can people find you as we kind of close the episode?
Yeah, well, first, I just appreciate what you're doing. I think that people who see entrepreneurship as something they're interested in, but they're in a field like medicine they appear on completely divergent paths. Entrepreneurship is complete freedom, it's complete autonomy, and a career in medicine is almost the opposite in terms of that spectrum. But what you're doing in terms of bringing those things together and converging those two paths is a powerful one. And I think that, people need to hear and see what you're doing, because they can see something they're inspired to be. And so you're doing that. So I just want to commend you with that. People can always find me at Evolving Medic, really anywhere on social media. I have a website too, evolvingmedic.com. So Evolving Medic, just really anywhere. I think the biggest things that I'm up to now are growing this Teach As You Learn community and making videos. So I'll make videos. I promise. I can promise this at least once a week, usually on Saturdays. Most of the times now they're in the form of short form content because I found it's a little bit more doable. But if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, it's mostly related to motivation and inspiration for people pursuing careers in medicine or just want to be passionate about their professional and personal success. So I appreciate you again, and I hope that everyone listening to this can see some opportunities to be your full self in a career that usually wants to kind of isolate you into a cookie cutter model. But there are different things that you can bring to the table that are unique to you and that the field needs. So thank you again, Daniella.
Of course. No, thank you, JR, again for being our first guest on the Resident Founder podcast. I hope that you found this conversation really enjoyable and also have a lot of good takeaways from it. So thank you guys again for tuning into the Resident Founder podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next one.